Hello everyone. In this introduction to Unity video, we are going to talk about components. Before we get into it, remember to subscribe to see more and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload. It really helps me out. Now, on with the show. So, people who are new to Unity and probably start looking up how to develop games in Unity will have come across the term components several times, but may not fully understand what a component is. So, that is the big question. What is a component? Well, a component in its simplest terms is an item that you can attach to any object in your game, which will be able to manipulate and control that object in various different ways, depending on what the component is designed for. So let's go straight into an example. This main camera right here has a camera component, as you would expect. It is a camera. And this component itself is literally encased in that. So everything you see here in the inspector panel is classed as a component. So we've got the transform component and we have the camera component. Now, the settings that are here for the camera component are only reflective of this particular component on this particular object. Anything we change here will not affect anything else in the scene, no other object. Obviously, we can change the field of view. That's only reflective of this object. We could render this to a texture rather than the camera itself, the output. We could do all kinds of different things. So the transform component is where we would have the location, rotation, and size of any particular object. And you'll notice that every single object that we're able to manipulate in this way has a transform component. There are slight variations, which I will get into later on in this video, but realistically, we need to have some kind of figures that tell us where an object is, which way it's facing, and how big it is. That's why the transform component should always exist on every object. So we can add and remove various components from different objects, but sometimes not all components fit on the same object. So for example, there is no point having a light component with a camera component with a collider component all on the same object. It would serve no real purpose. It would just be a bit redundant. So if we move down to the directional light, we can see that the default component here is indeed a light with all the controls that we need to change. If we keep going a little further down, we have the cube, and that's where things start getting a bit more complicated as they have various different components. And as I said earlier, a component is an item that you can attach to any game object that will be able to manipulate it. In this case, the components attached to the cube render it so we can see it, and also have a collider on it so we can actually collide with things. So maybe have a wall that we cannot walk through. That is the reason for a collider. But there are many other different types of components that you can add. So if we go to the add component button down here, we can see all the various types of components in this list, and they flow through and go to different things. We can see here, if we go to miscellaneous, there are tons of different components. We can go to effects, we can go to, let's go to physics 2D. There are hundreds of different types of components, and components can also be customized. However, for beginners to Unity, you're probably not going to want to delve into customization just yet. You'll notice another one down here, scripts. Now, a script can be classed as a component because you attach it to an object, and therefore you are able to manipulate or change or dictate what that object can and can't do via the script. Therefore, it is a component. Like I say, you can add almost any component to any object, but whether it serves a purpose is, well, that's up to you really. For example, we have a camera now added to our cube. Is it really necessary? Probably not. We can add some audio to... Oh, well, let's add that one. So that just stands it. As I said earlier, you can add almost all. So we can add audio source, but we cannot add the previous audio that we tried to. So like I say, almost all. But either way, everything we add here is a component, every single one of these. Same applies for sphere. We can do the same kind of thing, any kind of component. And we're also able to search. So for example, let's try adding a nav mesh agent. There we go. So we've just typed nav to get nav, then we got nav mesh agent. So we, like I say, add anything to particular objects, I guess, as long as they're able to accept it. So the main thing to remember is a component is what controls any items. So the difference is going to come when we get to things like UI. So for example, the canvas does indeed have a transform component, however, it is not actually called a transform component. We can see here, transform on the sphere, however, the canvas is rect transform. So generally when it comes to UI, everything is done the same kind of way, just ever so slightly differently. So this component still has to exist. However, we can still add various different components to even UI objects. Go to event system. Because this is not theoretically UI, although it deals with the UI, it still needs a position in the scene, so it still has the transform component. So I think the key things to remember when it comes to components is that they can control things. They all need a form of a transform component, and be careful what you add to each item, because if you add too many components which have no meaning whatsoever to that particular object, it's just kind of pointless, really. So yeah, I think that's the main thing to note. Components control everything. Hope that clears up components, guys, and if you would like to see more, check out my other videos. They should be all around the screen now, I think. Top left, top right. Have a look. Feel free to, and I hope to see you around in another one of my videos.